off our Voting Accessibility Task Force. As of 2024, about over 80% of Vermonters were registered to vote, and over 70% of Vermonters have participated in the general election for president in the last 2 cycles. These numbers are great, strong numbers. They, in fact, outpace the national average. The national average is 73% of eligible folks are actually registered, and about 65% actually vote across the country. But we never want to rest on our laurels, and I think it's always a good idea to strive for 100%. And it has come to our knowledge in recent years that we have some groups of Vermonters who face particular obstacles and have particular difficulties that keep them from being able to vote. And it is my belief that if we bring Vermonters around the table and talk about what those obstacles are, really identify them, that we can break down those barriers so that every single Vermonter feels empowered to and able to and ready to vote. When we live in a democracy, voting is how we tell our leaders what we want them to do. It's how we send a message to our local select boards or to our school board. It's how we send a message to our legislators. It's how we send a message through our representatives to Congress about the things that we want them to work on. And I want to make sure that every single Vermonter is empowered to be able to send that message by participating in elections and by voting. So I'm really proud to stand here today with a group of partner organizations, and I will run through who the different organizations are later. But I also, just think it's an important opportunity for us to take note of the fact that we are just about 1 year away from our midterm elections. Our 2026 general election is just a year away, and so this is the perfect time to launch this Voting Accessibility Task Force and to get to work making sure that every eligible Vermonter is able to vote. I want to send a quick special high five to Dan Brown from our Elections Division, who is spearheading this work and will be working with partner organizations across the state to dissect each of the unique circumstances that impact these different groups. So our task force is going to focus on the goal of increasing civic engagement and voter turnout within 4 systemically underserved communities. First and foremost, unhoused individuals. We know that Vermont is experiencing a homelessness crisis. We know that those folks in Vermont have trouble figuring out how to register to vote. We need to make sure that we're working on making sure that every Vermonter who is eligible to vote is able to cast that ballot. Second, we need to work on supporting people with disabilities. There are people who have physical barriers that make it more challenging to participate in elections and to be able to execute a ballot of their own free will without having to ask for somebody else's help. Third, Safe at Home program participants. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Safe at Home program is, it is an address confidentiality program that focused historically on survivors of domestic violence, human trafficking, or stalking. And thanks to the legislature's foresight, it now also includes providers and recipients of certain kinds of protected health care. These are folks who have some specific barriers to being able to vote, and we want to make sure that we reach out to these program participants and to the partner organizations that support them to break down those barriers to the greatest extent possible. And finally, for those of you who are Vermont Public fans, you may know that we are also focusing on incarcerated individuals. And we had a brief conversation on Vermont Edition last week about some of the particular barriers for incarcerated folks, including just the ability to receive their ballot in the mail. So we've got some foundational challenges there. that we want to make sure we address for Vermonters who are incarcerated. You know, our democracy is strongest when everybody can participate. No government can say that they have the mandate to do this or to not do that if we don't have everyone participating in our elections. And so I'm really excited to be here today to kick off this task force. This is the beginning, not the end. And if you know of, or if you are part of an organization that would like to be at the table with us, we want to welcome you to join us. So before I go on, or before we go any further, I want to make sure that I hand the first microphone over to Jenny Samuelson, the Secretary of the Agency of Human Services, which is the umbrella organization for several groups who will be able to work with us to break down barriers for some of these constituencies. So Jenny, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us. It's a privilege to join the Secretary of State's office in this effort. As was previously said, I'm Jenny Samuelson, and I'm here on behalf of the Agency of Human Services. Our mission is to improve the conditions and well-being of those in Vermont. Our mission is also committed to fostering positive change for the lives of Vermonters. It underscores our dedication to creating an environment where individuals not only survive but thrive, and this includes voting. As AHS, we work closely with a broad breadth of programs from healthcare and housing to economic supports, disability services, and corrections. What ties all of this work together is our commitment to equity and inclusion, ensuring that every Vermonter has access to the resources, supports, and opportunities they need to fully participate in their communities. And that's where our mission naturally overlaps with voting and democracy. When people face barriers to meeting their basic needs, when they're unhoused, living with a disability, or in correctional facilities, those barriers can also prevent them from exercising their right to vote. Civic participation is not separate from human services. It's a reflection of the well-being and the dignity and sense of belonging of the people that we serve. Every Vermonter should be able to have a choice in shaping the policies and the leaders that impact their lives on a daily basis. Whether it's exercising whether they're experiencing homelessness, trying to navigate where to register to vote, people who are experiencing domestic violence, seeking protection for their identity while still engaging in democracy, or individuals in state custody wanting to understand their voting rights. These are not abstract issues. They're real barriers faced by people that our agency serves every single day. I'm encouraged to participate in this task force. Our collective goal is to increase civic engagement and voter turnout among Vermonters who have historically been underserved or excluded from this important part of our democracy. Within AHS, we see a unique opportunity to contribute. We have direct relationships with the communities represented through this initiative, through our Departments of Corrections, our Department for Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living, the Department for Children and Families. We can help identify where systems unintentionally create barriers and work collaboratively to remove them and make voting and access to voting an opportunity for many that we serve. We can bring forward data, insights, and most importantly, the voices from the people we serve to help shape meaningful and sustainable solutions. My hope for this task force is that it's not only to identify action items and measurable goals, but also to build trust, long-term partnerships that both across the government and organizations that are represented here today. Together, we can make voting a civic engagement more accessible, more inclusive, more reflective of the Vermont we want to live in. As we look ahead at the 2026 elections, I hope we'll be able to point to real, tangible progress. More people registered, more people casting ballots, and more people who feel that their participation matters. This work is about more than elections. It's about connection, empowerment, and belonging. Democracy only works when everyone has a seat at the table. And through this task force, we're taking an important step towards making that vision a reality for all Vermonters. Thank you.
It's right here.
Yep. So next up is Isaac, who is one of my colleagues at the Department of Corrections, and their work is foundational to this work.
Thank you, Secretary. Good afternoon. My name is Isaac Dano, and I serve as the Policy Director for the Vermont Department of Corrections. For many Vermonters, when we picture our elections, we think of a local town hall, a striped voting booth, or a ballot dropped in the mail. But we don't often picture someone casting that ballot from behind prison walls. And that's because across this country, voting rights are overwhelmingly stripped from incarcerated Americans, and often restricted even after people return home, sometimes for life. Today, more than 1 million citizens in this nation cannot vote simply because they are in prison. But in Vermont, things are different. Along with our neighbors in Maine, we are the only state where an incarcerated citizen never loses the right to vote, not for a year, not for a day. And that has been true since our founding. That distinction says something profound about who we are as Vermonters. It reflects our belief that incarceration does not equal disenfranchisement, that those behind bars are still valued members of our communities, and that our democracy works best when no one is left behind. Still, we know that voting while incarcerated comes with real barriers. A person in custody can't freely browse political news online, can't register using their correctional facility address, and can't visit a polling place on election day. Mail-in ballots remain their only option, which means preparation, communication, and civic education are essential to making sure every vote counts. These are exactly the challenges this task force will take on, because it's not enough for a right to exist in theory alone. We have to make that right real in practice. We're living through a moment when democracy in America feels more fragile than it has in living memory. And it's precisely in times like these that Vermont's example matters most. I take real hope from this growing effort to ensure that incarcerated Vermonters stay connected to their rights, to their civic responsibilities, and to the communities they will one day rejoin. The Department of Corrections is proud to be part of this work with the Secretary of State's office and so many dedicated organizations. Finally, I want to recognize one of these key partners, Disability Rights Vermont. They've been doing this work for years, registering and informing incarcerated voters, one person and one ballot at a time. I'm honored to introduce their Executive Director, Lindsay Owen, to share more about this critical work. Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me to speak with you all today alongside the Secretary of State's office and other critical partners in this important and exciting initiative to continue to improve and ensure access to and engagement with the electoral process in Vermont. My name is Lindsay Owen Saintamore, and I'm the Executive Director at Disability Rights Vermont. I've been with the organization for over 13 years and the Executive Director since May of 2021. Disability Rights Vermont is the protection and advocacy agency for the entire state. The P&A system was established by Congress in 1975 after much attention in the media exposing horrific abuse and neglect of people with disabilities at a facility named Willowbrook in New York. The abuse and neglect was profound and shocking and largely unknown until individuals spoke out. Specifically, Geraldo Rivera stepped up to help. And as a result, the P&As across the country were created to receive a variety of federal funding to investigate and remedy abuse, neglect, and serious rights violations of people with disabilities in every state and territory. Once the Help America Vote Act was signed into law in 2002, and there was a federal avenue for P&As to protect the civic rights of people with disabilities, Disability Rights Vermont has embraced that task to the fullest for the last 23 years. In that time, we've assisted 1,563 Vermonters with disabilities with 1,856 requests for voting needs. We have conducted 242 polling place accessibility surveys with only one town declining, and that's out of the total 265 polling places throughout the state. Disability Rights Vermont has worked collaboratively with the Secretary of State's office for many years. In 2019 and 2020, the collaboration was on focus groups to identify barriers to voting in the community, and we jointly published a report with the results. We have also collaborated annually over the last 20 years with the Department of Corrections to conduct voter registration drives within the prison facilities, assisting incarcerated individuals with disabilities to complete and submit voter registration forms and absentee ballots. Also, for the past several years, we've partnered with the Department of Corrections to ensure that incarcerated individuals with disabilities have access to our nonpartisan voters guide, both electronically and hard copy in the facilities. We've partnered again more recently with the Secretary of State's office last year to help table and register people to vote at events like Pride Marches or farmers markets statewide to increase enthusiasm and participation in the electoral process. We have also collaborated last year with End Homelessness Vermont to conduct voter registration drives at different shelter locations throughout the state to increase access and participation from people experiencing homelessness. Finally, Disability Rights Vermont is a member of the Act 133 Working Group tasked with producing a report related to accessible and inclusive local elections and public meetings. Disability is the largest minority group in this country. It is also the only group that any individual at any time could become a part of. It simply is part of the human experience. And so the intersection of disability with these other vulnerable populations, those that are incarcerated, unhoused, victims of serious crimes, and residents of long-term care facilities is vast. Disability Rights Vermont's advocacy for these vulnerable populations is not a new chapter for us, but we could not be more excited to see what this task force can do to really address the barriers that we have been identifying along the way. There is still a lot to do, and this is the perfect time to listen to the voices of those communities that are being heavily impacted and hurt without consideration or consultation. We hear from Vermonters with disabilities routinely with gratitude for feeling heard. Your vote is your voice, and we are here to help intentionally amplify these voices from these vulnerable and valuable communities. Thank you. Introducing Sarah Robertson, the Co-Executive Director of the Domestic Violence Network.
Good afternoon. I want to start by thanking the Secretary of State for her leadership and the launch of the Voting Accessibility Task Force, which marks a powerful commitment to increasing civic and voter engagement, including among survivors of domestic and sexual violence. For many survivors, their experience of violence includes a lack of choice and control over the most personal elements of their lives. While domestic and sexual violence can contribute to disempowerment, voting and civic engagement is an act of connection, choice, and power. Many survivors find meaning and healing in civic engagement and involvement in their communities. The Secretary of State's office already provides an essential service to survivors through the Safe at Home Address Confidentiality Program. The program allows survivors to use a substitute mailing address as their legal address and forward mail to a confidential home or workplace address at no cost. This program allows survivors to access government services and register to vote without putting their safety at risk. When survivors vote, their voices can be heard. Survivors have an opportunity to choose who represents them and make policy decisions that impact their lives. Every Vermonter and every survivor should be able to meaningfully participate in our democracy. Once again, thank you so much, and I'll hand it back over to you. We're ready to get to work.
Thank you. Hooray, couldn't have said that better. So thank you so much to folks from these partner organizations. We are really excited to dig into this work. These groups will be meeting regularly in order to identify and remedy some of the barriers that these Vermonters experience in trying to stay civically engaged and cast their ballot. And so I thank you all deeply for your commitment and your partnership in this organization. I want to acknowledge all of the organizations who are partnering with us in this, and also say once again that if you or an organization you know of would like to participate, please don't hesitate to reach out. So in addition to the Agency of Human Services, Department of Corrections, Disability Rights Vermont, and the Network Against Domestic and Sexual Violence, we also have the ACLU, within Secretary Samuelson's agency, the Department of Disabilities, Aging and Independent Living, End Homelessness Vermont, Housing and Homelessness Alliance of Vermont, the League of Women Voters, Vermont Center for Independent Living, Vermont Cure, or Citizens United for the Rehabilitation of Errants, and Vermont Legal Aid, Disability Law Project. Thank you all for coming today. We have 1 year to make sure that we identify and implement some changes that will really make sure that every Vermonter feels welcome and prepared to cast their ballot in 2026. So we would be happy to take questions if anyone from the media has a question.
Is this the first time that a task force like this has been set up in state government to do this, or?
I don't really know. That's a good question. I don't recall knowing about one previously, but that doesn't mean that it hadn't been done by past secretaries.
Yeah,
No.
so at least for a while.
Yes.
Been one, yeah.
It's been a while.
I guess, what about this moment has led your office and everyone here to sit down and start doing this work?
I think without being too flip, I want to get to 100% participation, right? I want our leaders to know that when they are elected, when they prevail in a contest of ideas, that they've heard from every Vermonter. When you look nationally at that 65% of people actually participating in votes, and we see that 65% is pretty evenly divided, that leaves a whole 1/3, very equal to the two sides who actually came out to vote, of people who didn't participate. And we don't see that stark set of numbers necessarily in very many of our general elections, but we do see local elections and state primary elections where very few Vermonters participate. And we know that there are barriers that these four types of Vermonters experience, and we want to make sure that we are identifying and eliminating those barriers so that these folks feel empowered to be a part of our elections.
And I know Isaac talked a little bit about the importance of mail-in voting for folks who are incarcerated. Obviously, as well as I do that we've seen really real threats to mail-in voting at the federal level from the Trump administration. Sort of on that piece, and more generally, how will this task force grapple with those decisions and changes at the federal level, and how will that impact your work?
Well, we know that the United States Constitution, which I took an oath to uphold, says very clearly that the states will determine the time, place, and manner of elections. That means that if the state of Vermont, through its legislature, has chosen to mail ballots, we will continue to do that. The one thing that I think is important for every Vermonter to know is that you're going to get your ballot for the November election automatically in the mail. If you would also like to vote a ballot in one of the other elections that happen during the year, whether it's your municipality that does its work by Australian ballot or whether it's the statewide primary, you can go to the Vermont voter portal and you can put in a request there that your town clerk will receive. And you can vote by mail in every election if you want to. We have no excuse absentee ballot for every other election in the state, and automatic vote by mail for the general election. Other questions? Wonderful. Well, I'm sure that these fine folks would like to stick around if you have any follow-ups for these folks who have, a more specialized focus on one of our groups within the task force. And I just want to say thank you to our elections director, Sean Sheehan, and our Deputy Secretary of State, Lauren Hibbert, for supporting the work of the task force. And thank you, Dan. You've got a lot of work ahead of you, but it's going to be a fun ride. Can't wait to see what we accomplish. Thank you all so much.
Thank you.
It's a good thing I turned the air conditioning on. It's kind of warm in here right now.
It's the heat of democracy.
Yes, all the cameras are making everyone flushed.
I'm Rosie LaCara, town clerk in East Montpelier. I'm having trouble finding a prisoner.
Okay, we can help
Oh.
locate that person.